All right, get cozy tonight because we are stepping into a scene straight out of a mystery novel. Imagine a stormy night, you're settled in with a good book. Well, the book we're diving into is Death in the Library, and it's full of twists.
Sounds intriguing. What makes this deep dive special?
We're not just passively reading, we're putting on our detective hats. We're going to try to solve the case. Right alongside the main character, Detective Pierce. Think of it as a literary escape room.
Oh, I like it. It'll be interesting to see how the author doles out the clues and how we interpret them compared to a seasoned detective. So tell me, where does this mystery take place?
Well, the setting itself is like something out of a Gothic novel. We're in Ravenswood. Specifically, it's Grand City Library. Picture towering shelves, smell of old parchment, that hushed atmosphere. And right in the middle of it all, we find our victim, Professor Arthur Gaines, a respected historian.
A historian murdered in a library. You couldn't ask for a more fitting backdrop. What do we know about the circumstances of his death?
It's a classic locked room mystery. The library was closed for the night, limited number of people had access, and Professor Gaines was found dead at his reading desk. Definitely not how I'd want to spend an evening with a good book.
That definitely rules out a random act. So who are our suspects in this literary whodunit?
We've got three main characters. Each had a connection to the professor. First, there's Clara Jenkins, the librarian. She's like the gatekeeper of all the library's secrets, someone who knows its hidden corners and forgotten collections.
Interesting. That kind of intimate knowledge of the library could make her an invaluable ally or a very dangerous enemy. Who else is on our list of potential suspects?
Next, we have Victor Reed. He was also a historian, but his relationship with the professor was, let's just say, there was some professional rivalry. Apparently, their academic debates could get quite heated.
The clash of intellectual titans, a classic motive in many mysteries. Jealousy. The desire to be the top expert in your field. Those feelings can run deep. Who is our final suspect?
Last but not least, we have Emma Lane, a graduate student, assisting the professor with his research. There's something about her that seems a little off, like she's hiding something, almost too eager to please, you know.
Nervousness can be a sign of guilt, but it could also be fear, or simply the stress of being involved in such a situation. We'll have to watch her closely as the story unfolds. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the investigation, let's head back to the crime scene. What were the initial clues that Detective Pierce found?
Well, this is where things start to get really interesting. There are three main clues, and none of them scream obvious murder weapon, which is what makes this so intriguing.
Let's hear them.
First, we have a bloody fountain pen. It belonged to the professor, but it's a pretty unusual choice for a murder weapon.
I agree. That unusual choice immediately makes you wonder, was this a spontaneous act of violence or a carefully staged scene to throw off the investigation? What else? Did Detective Pierce find at the crime scene?
Then there's a torn piece of parchment, clutched in the professor's hand. It has a cryptic message scribbled on it. The answer lies beneath. What do you think it means?
Ooh, that sends chills down my spine. The answer lies beneath. It hints at a hidden secret. Something the professor was close to uncovering. Makes you wonder, was it this knowledge that got him killed?
Right. And it plays into the whole library setting so well, you automatically start thinking about hidden rooms, secret passages, lost archives.
Absolutely. And the parchment itself could be a vital clue. Was it stolen, planted, or was the professor trying to protect it? We'll have to see. What was the final clue?
Lastly, there's a dusty ladder, leaning against one of the highest shelves, with fresh fingerprints. Someone was definitely reaching for something, but who and why?
Okay, so we have a bloody fountain pen, an odd choice of weapon, a cryptic message possibly pointing to something valuable hidden in the library, and a ladder suggesting someone was searching for something. Detective Pierce has quite a puzzle to solve. What was her initial reaction?
To all of this, here's what I love about this deep dive. We actually get to see Detective Pierce's thought process. It's like we're right there in her head as she evaluates each clue and how it connects to the suspects.
That's fantastic. It gives us a chance to compare our own interpretations to those of an experienced detective. What stands out to her about each suspect?
She starts by analyzing each suspect's potential connection to the clues. For example, she notes that Clara, the librarian, seemed to know about the professor's research. Was she helping him or hindering him?
That's a great question. If she knew what he was looking for, she could have either been an invaluable resource or a roadblock, depending on her motives. How about Victor, the rival historian? What are Detective Pierce's initial thoughts on him?
Well, she's definitely aware of the rivalry between Victor and the professor. He even notes a comment Victor made earlier, something along the lines of, yes, we argued often, but it was nothing personal, almost too casual, don't you think?
Yes, I see what you mean. That nonchalant attitude might be a way of downplaying their conflict, maybe even masking deeper feelings of resentment. And what about Emma, the graduate student? What's Detective Pierce's impression of her?
Emma's nervousness is what really sticks out to Detective Pierce. She wonders if Emma saw something she's not telling, perhaps something that happened before or after the professor's death.
A witness who's too afraid to speak up. That's always a compelling element in a mystery. It seems like everyone in this library has something to hide.
Exactly. And before we delve any further into Detective Pierce's investigation, I think it's time for us to put on our own detective hats and try to piece together what we know so far.
I'm game. Let's see if we can crack this case before Detective Pierce does.
All right, the source material poses 3 key questions for us to consider. First up, why was the fountain pen used as a weapon? Could it have been a crime of passion?
That's a great question. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, it's such a specific, almost delicate object, isn't it? Not something you'd typically associate with violence. It makes me wonder if it was indeed a crime of passion, something that happened in the heat of the moment, maybe during an argument.
I see where you're going with that. The choice of weapon could tell us a lot about the killer's state of mind and their relationship to the victim. What about the torn parchment and its cryptic message? Do you think it was the motive for the murder?
That's a tough one. The answer lies beneath. It definitely suggests that the professor was on the verge of uncovering something important. Perhaps the parchment itself was the motive. Maybe it contained a clue to some long-lost treasure, or a secret someone was desperate to protect.
Interesting. The message could be interpreted in so many ways. Was it a literal clue, pointing to a hidden location within the library? Or was it metaphorical, referring to some hidden knowledge or truth the professor had stumbled upon? We'll have to consider all the angles. Okay, last question for our budding detectives. Who used the ladder, and what were they searching for on the high shelf?
That's the million-dollar question. It seems like such a small detail, but it could be crucial to the case. None of the suspects have admitted to using the ladder, yet it clearly played a role in the events leading up to the murder. What are your thoughts?
Well, it could have been the killer, trying to stage the scene, making it look like an accident. Or maybe someone was searching for something related to the parchment, perhaps another piece of the puzzle. It could even be a complete red herring, meant to throw us off the scent.
This case is full of twists and turns. I'm dying to know what Detective Pierce uncovers next. All right, we left off with more questions than answers. A bloody fountain pen, a cryptic message, a ladder with mysterious fingerprints. Detective Pierce has her work cut out for her.
She does. But luckily, we're along for the ride. To see how a real pro tackles this literary mystery, where does she focus her investigation next?
Well, she decides to go back to each suspect and really dig into those stories. Remember, she's not just looking for facts. She's observing their behavior, looking for those subtle inconsistencies that might reveal the truth. First up, she revisits Clara Jenkins, the librarian.
Ah, yes. The keeper of the library's secrets. What does Detective Pierce learn from her?
When Detective Pierce presses her about the professor's research, Claire reveals something truly fascinating. Apparently, the professor had been asking about a secret compartment hidden somewhere in the library archives.
Hold on, so that cryptic message on the parchment, the answer lies beneath. Could it be a literal clue?
Right. Suddenly, the library itself becomes even more intriguing. It's not just a backdrop for the mystery. It could be hiding the key to solving it.
And Clara, with her extensive knowledge of the library, instantly becomes a more central figure. Was she helping the professor find this hidden compartment? Or was she trying to stop him?
Her role in all of this is definitely getting more complex. Okay. Next up, Detective Pierce returns to Victor Reed, the rival historian. Remember his key phrase? Yes, we argued often, but it was nothing personal. Well, let's see how that holds up under closer scrutiny.
It'll be interesting to see
Yeah.
if his demeanor changes at all, now that Detective Pierce is starting to zero in on the suspects.
She specifically asks him about the torn parchment, and his reaction is, well, let's just say it's not exactly what you'd expect from someone with nothing personal at stake.
Tell us more. How does he react?
He becomes extremely defensive. He denies knowing anything about the parchment or the message, almost too emphatically. He insists that his research had nothing to do with the professors and that he barely even saw him that day.
That strong denial is almost more suspicious than a simple, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. It raises the question, what is he so afraid of being connected to? Remember, we discussed the possibility of jealousy as a motive. If Victor believed the professor was close to a groundbreaking discovery, and maybe this parchment was the key, wouldn't that be a perfect reason for Victor to want to keep it hidden or even eliminate the competition?
Absolutely. And let's not forget, we're dealing with an unusual murder weapon, a fountain pen. Could that be a weapon of opportunity? Something snatched up in a moment of rage during a heated argument about the parchment, or even the discovery itself.
I like where you're going with that. The pieces are definitely starting to fit together, but we're not quite there yet. Detective Pierce still needs to talk to our last suspect, Emma Lane, the graduate student. Remember, her key phrase was, "He sent me to find another book. When I returned, he was already dead."
Her alibi seems pretty solid on the surface, but Detective Pierce sensed that nervousness, that feeling that Emma might be holding something back. Let's see what happens. When she digs a little deeper,
This is where things take another interesting turn. Detective Pierce brings up the ladder, the one with the fresh fingerprints, and asks Emma directly if she used it.
oh, getting right to the point. I bet Emma wasn't expecting that.
Her reaction is almost more telling than her words. She hesitates, clearly uncomfortable with the question. Finally, she admits she did climb the ladder earlier that day to retrieve a book for the professor, but insists she didn't see anything unusual up there.
That hesitation speaks volumes. Why would she be so reluctant to admit to something as seemingly insignificant as using a ladder? It makes you wonder. If she did see something up there, something she's terrified of revealing.
Right. Maybe something related to the crime, or perhaps something that incriminates one of the other suspects. Now, I have to say, at this point in the story, even I was starting to get suspicious of Emma.
I can imagine. This is where the reader really starts to second guess everything and everyone. It's a testament to the author's skill in building suspense.
Absolutely. So we have Clara hinting at a secret compartment, Victor's defensive denials, and Emma's clear discomfort about the ladder. The plot definitely thickens, but what's fascinating is how Detective Pierce puts all of this together to actually solve the case.
This is the part I'm most excited for. Does she have a sudden epiphany? Or is it a more methodical process of deduction?
It's a combination of both, actually. She takes all the information she's gathered, the clues from the crime scene, the suspect statements, their behavior, and even her own intuition, and starts piecing it all together like a giant jigsaw puzzle.
So let's get to the big reveal. Who does Detective Pierce ultimately conclude is responsible for the professor's death?
Well, she looks at the evidence, she revisits the clues, she analyzes each suspect's potential motive, and finally she reveals that the killer is Victor Reed, the rival historian.
It seems our suspicions about him were correct. His rivalry with the professor, his defensive behavior, those strong denials, it all pointed toward his involvement. But how does Detective Pierce specifically prove his guilt?
She realizes that the torn parchment with the message, "The answer lies beneath," was more than just a cryptic clue. It was the key to unlocking Victor's motive and the entire sequence of events. Remember, the parchment hinted at a hidden compartment in the library, a compartment that the professor was desperately searching for.
So the professor wasn't just researching history. He was on the verge of a major discovery, something potentially groundbreaking. And Victor, consumed by his own ambition and jealousy, couldn't let that happen.
Exactly. Detective Pierce deduces that Victor must have overheard the professor talking about this discovery, perhaps even saw the parchment, driven by his desire to claim the discovery for himself. He confronted the professor, demanding the parchment, and whatever information it contained.
A classic case of professional rivalry turned deadly. It makes sense given Victor's personality and his clear animosity towards the professor. But what about the latter? How does that fit into the picture?
Detective Pierce believes that after killing the professor, Victor used the ladder to stage the scene. He wanted to make it look like the professor was reaching for a book when he fell and accidentally hit his head. A tragic accident rather than a deliberate act of murder. Remember those fresh fingerprints we were so intrigued by? It was Victor's attempt to cover his tracks.
Ah, so he used the ladder to create a believable scenario, a way to deflect suspicion. But Detective Pierce, with her sharp mind, saw through his deception. She noticed the inconsistencies in his alibi, the way he overemphasized his lack of involvement, and ultimately she realized that the latter was the key to understanding how he tried to manipulate the investigation.
And there's one final twist to this story that I think you'll find particularly intriguing.
I'm all ears. What could be more intriguing than a jealous rival, a staged crime scene, and a cryptic message?
Remember how the parchment said, "The answer lies beneath"? Well, it turns out, it was a literal clue. Detective Pierce discovered a secret drawer hidden beneath one of the bookshelves in the library archives. And guess what she found inside?
Don't tell me. The murder weapon, neatly tucked away.
No, even better. She found an ancient map.
Wow. So the professor wasn't just any historian. He was on the trail of some lost treasure or artifact. It makes Victor's motive even more understandable. He wasn't just trying to protect his reputation. He was trying to steal a potentially groundbreaking discovery.
Right. Talk about adding insult to injury,
Same.
but it also adds another layer of mystery to the story because the map itself isn't fully explained. We know it was passed along to other historians and researchers, but what it actually depicts, what secrets it holds, that's left to our imagination.
I love that. It's like the author is giving us, the readers, a chance to continue the adventure. What could this map lead to? A lost city? A hidden tomb? A priceless artifact? The possibilities are endless.
It's a brilliant way to end the story, isn't it? We get closure with the killer being brought to justice, but the mystery of the map keeps the story alive. It makes you think about all the secrets that are still out there, waiting to be discovered.
It really highlights the power of stories to transport us to different worlds and make us think about things in new ways.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Death in the Library, what are some of the key takeaways we can glean from this captivating tale?
Well, first and foremost, it's a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. The quiet librarian, the seemingly harmless fountain pen. Nothing is quite what it seems in this world of literary intrigue, and it underscores the importance of observation, of paying attention to those subtle details that others might overlook.
Right. Just like Detective Pierce, we had to carefully consider every clue, every word, every reaction to uncover the truth.
And I think there's a deeper message here as well. Something about the nature of knowledge and the lengths people will go to acquire it. The professor's pursuit of historical truth ultimately led to his demise. And Victor's ambition and jealousy proved to be his undoing. It makes you think about the ethical implications of our own pursuits, the balance between ambition and integrity.
It's a thought-provoking question for all of us, isn't it? How do we ensure that our desire for knowledge, for success, doesn't lead us down a dangerous path?
That's a question worth pondering, and I think that's the beauty of a good mystery. It entertains us, challenges us, and ultimately leaves us with something to think about long after the story is over.
So if you enjoyed this deep dive and want to experience the full thrill of Death in the Library, we encourage you to check out the book, and as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Did you solve the case before Detective Pierce? Were you surprised by the ending? Share your theories and insights in the comments below. Until next time, happy reading.